As I filmed for my Fandoms International doc at 2014's Animation and Gaming Convention, I couldn't help but reflect on my personal quest that brought me here.
Whew. What is a brony? Wow, that's there are quite a lot of definitions out there as far as what I think. I think fundamentally you have to start with, of course, a love of the show. But why am I a brony is actually more for the fandom itself.
Well, I mean, I always knew about My Little Pony. It came out when I was a kid. My sister was into it. I got into the newer one when I heard that Lauren Faust was working on it. I saw the infamous Cartoon Brew article that criticized it and stuff. So I thought, hey, I'll check it out. And I ended up really liking it.
The moment that got me to start watching My Little Pony, that hooked me into the fandom, was reaction images. They would post them online, they would show up on various forums, and I decided that these are funny and I had to find out what they were attached to. So I watched the first episode, liked it, and I just kept on watching episodes.
However, while on my quest to define my fandom, I've brushed shoulders with an even more perplexing one. Don't get me wrong, bronies are hard to define, even harder to explain, but at least we all share one universal trait, the love of the show. Contrast that to the anime fandom that is heavily divided into sub-fandoms revolving around specific anime subgenres like shonen and shoujo, or even down to individual shows amongst thousands. See, furries don't even have the luxury of being broadly connected by the love of one nation's animation. More like every nation's animation. Sorta. Somewhat. If it has a particular aesthetic. Maybe. It gets complicated.
In my definition, a furry can be anyone in general who enjoys anthro creatures, or maybe just drawing animals in general, but I know that that differs a lot from other people, because others say that you have to actually consider yourself a furry to be a furry.
Sometimes they see themselves as the actual animal that they portray. Others pick their favorite animal or something that they like.
Pretty much anybody who has similar interest with the anthropomorphic fandom. I remember from my early childhood, Lion King, talking animals, stuff like that. That's pretty much what brought me into the fandom and sparked my interest in being a furry myself.
Furry's presence at ANG 2014 is certainly not abnormal, as furries and fursuiters were present last year as well, highlighting Cincinnati's very active furry community.
The greater Cincinnati furry community is amazing. There are awesome people around here who, when I'm hosting meets, they help me out. They help me run the meet, they help me gather everybody up, make sure everybody's fed for the grill outs, and help me organize the meets itself.
I think the main part about furries is that they like to take part in the community more than anything else. Most people in the furry fandom are generally very friendly and nice, and just people can make good friends among each other and have similar interests, and that's really what it's about.
They will stand up for one another and protect one another. And sometimes we don't get that closeness from our families, from our friends, whatever we're trying to get. So it's a very close group.
The reason why I'm involved in this fandom is because I feel comfortable around my friends. I feel comfortable around the community that is involved in with the furry fandom itself. And also, it helps me get out my performer side as well.
Kids tend to like it. Kids like the pictures. Lots of people love the photos. And then by sharing your art, sharing your suits, whatever it is, you get to know that person eventually on the real them.
Like I said, defining who furries are is confusing. Heck, I love My Little Pony and have a life-size plushie of Happy from Fairy Tale above my editing desk. Does that make me a furry? It's time to get to the bottom of this. And what better place than its roots? The anthropomorphic art fueling this fandom. Or to be specific, the artist behind the art.
Hey, I'm Darren Mueller.
I'm Jackie Hernandez.
And we are the owners of Ringtail Cafe Productions, an independent comic book publishing company based out of Cincinnati, Ohio. What furry and anthropomorphic art brings to the table is a lot of interesting visual cues. Human characters are fun and interesting, but there's a lot of things you can do with animal characters visually, with colors, shapes, differences in sizes and things like that. Having a giant lizard character next to a cute little lemur character is visually a lot more fun.
One of the early lessons we learn in drawing is you want your characters to all be very distinct from each other. So if you have one character who's a fox and you have another character who is a totally different species, it makes them really easy to tell them apart.
We've done a bunch of work with schools in the area, mostly in the tri-state area. We've gone to a number of schools where we've done seminars on how to make comics for kids, which is always a lot of fun for us.
It's always great getting to work with the kids. They're so creative and so imaginative. One of the exercises we almost always do when we go and talk to the kids is to tell them about how we make a comic and then kind of guide them through the process of making a comic as a group. They get to come up with an idea and we'll do the storyboards and we'll do the art, and they basically get to create their own comic as a group, and it really gets the kids fired up.
Shockingly, I found charity and comics are not the only thing depriving the Ringtail Cafe's crew of their recommended daily amount of sleep.
A friend of ours knew that we were interested in running a convention, and they offered to let us do several hours of paneling and events at their show to get our feet wet, to get a feel for what it was going to be like to run a show. The feedback and response we got from people was so overwhelming that we ended up having to get our own hotel.
I believe it was about 2 months from the point where we were going to do the little mini event at this other show to the point where we actually had the convention. So there wasn't a whole lot of time, which was probably a good thing in hindsight, because I think if we'd had more time, we would have realized how crazy it is to put together a con in 2 months.
If we'd had 3 months, we probably would have said, no, there's not enough time, but it was so tight to the wire that we didn't have time to stop and think it was crazy to make a show in such a short time. Given the short notice that we had last year with throwing the show together, we didn't have a lot of time to do decorations in line with our theme. That's something we spent a lot more time on this year around.
Our theme for this year is actually One with the Machine, and that one's a lot of fun because it's kind of a cyberpunk, Tron, sci-fi sort of theme, which we feel is great for people who aren't just furries, but just interested in those particular genres.
My documentary finally had a target to set my lens on.
Perhaps this will be a turning point in her life. Perhaps she will see the value of mankind. Perhaps she will finally write that novel she's really been meaning to do.
For a small convention going on only 2 years, they sure have their bases covered. They have both an artist alley and a dealer's room, furry parade, photo shoot, a video game chill space, the previously noted con-wide game, and of course panels covering a variety of subjects.
It's got personality.
They even have a panel for me.
We put in a lot of effort into handling the media because we know that you guys are here for fun. The last thing you need to do is worry that some dumb stuff reporter out there is going to paint a very, very dreadful picture on your hometown news station that your boss is going to see.
I have always said that nobody becomes a furry. People are born a furry, and they then discover there's a name for it. Human beings have been looking at animals and trying to think of them as us, and vice versa, for thousands of years. The oldest known piece of human art that has been found by archaeologists was found in Africa. It is thousands of years old, and it depicts a human figure with the head of a lion. So we have been looking at animals as humans and humans as animals since the very early dawning ages of civilization. Fursuiters are actors, they're students, politicians, police officers, firefighters, soldiers, scientists, anyone who has that drive, that dream, that imagination to want to bring one of these creatures to life.
It seems I found the perfect person to answer several of my questions on the furry fandom. First off, are all furries fursuiters?
There's a common misconception that a furry is someone who dresses up like an animal. No, a furry is somebody who dreams of animals. The ones who dress up are the fursuiters, and they are the minority for many reasons. Economic reasons, other limitations. But I've always said that they are the most visible part of furry fandom, and that's why they're so closely associated with us.
Where do you believe the furry fandom's negative image in the mass media came from?
The very first furry convention, the introduction of the world to this phenomenon, took place at a convention that was established in Southern California. The organizers of that convention, for reasons that I do not know, so I cannot comment on them, did not seem to have much concern for the image that was being projected. But the problem is, first impressions are lasting impressions. And it has been my mission for the last 20 years and more to try to combat that first impression. The only way we can combat it is to show that that's not what we're all about. And I can point as evidence, I'm a scientist, we like evidence, to the fact that that first furry convention didn't really care about public perception, and they encouraged the more outlandish. Anthrocon has very, very strict standards of conduct. We do not permit the outlandish. That is something you do on your own. We do not want that at our convention. Anthrocon is the largest furry convention in the world. That other convention died long ago. And I think that's evidence enough that furries don't want that.
Okay then, what would you say defines the furry fandom?
We have people who have dedicated their lives to others in this fandom. And when those people go out and they talk about furry fandom, they can do it from the standpoint of someone who lives for others. They are very unselfish people. And that really is our strength. Furries like to make other people's lives better. And that seems to be a universal truism of this fandom. We are made up of people who want to make other people happy. And I've never seen a greater international global gathering of people of like minds than this little fandom we have made for ourselves. And I was perusing the message board one day, and I saw an exchange take place. It started with Mid-East fur. And the announcement was, hey, I am a Middle Eastern fur. Are there any others here? And the flag was Israel. And the very first response was from Saudi Arabia. Yes, right here. Here I am. The next one from Palestine. Yes, furry here. We have been looking for that sort of détente for decades, and it's eluded us. But simply by putting on ears and tails, we have found it. I don't think there's any better descriptor of the way that the idea of furry can bring human beings together under a very common flag than that.
Ringtail Cafe, proving themselves true insomniacs, also hosts not many minicons throughout the year, including a holiday celebration with fitting events, like present exchanges, photos with Santa, art competitions, and a game or two of Cards Against Humanity.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're done.
Am I a furry? I have to say no. At least in my definition. Because while I do enjoy anthropomorphic art and plan to see Zootopia opening day, I don't subscribe to the fandom the same way I do with the Brony fandom or the Fairy Tale fandom. It's like with Star Wars with me. I love most of the movies and the lore, but I don't consider myself a Jedi. Or even know if that's the right term. I found this sentiment is not even that uncommon, since the comic artist Thomas Fischbach, who primarily creates anthropomorphic comics, doesn't consider himself a furry, while a massive chunk of his fans are. For me, being in a fandom is not just about what you like, but how you like it and with who. Or in short, choosing to be a part of the community in a more intimate way. That said, as a fan of fans, I'm a fan of furries, normal people with a particular aesthetic interest. Well, as normal as people can be. People are rather weird after all. Some people like My Little Pony.
message to non-furries. You might have heard this, you might have heard that. I'll tell you what, come join us. Come and see. See what it's about. That's my invitation to you.